Fallacy of Grey. We talk about the grey area in tax quite a lot. A lot of people are like, we can save some money here, we can work in the grey area. And there's a great quote here, which I'm just going to read in its entirety, which is, the sophisticate says, the world isn't black and white. No one does pure good or pure bad. It's all grey. Therefore, no one is better than anyone else. And the Zeta says, knowing only grey, you conclude that all greys are the same shade. You mock the simplicity of the two-colour view, yet you replace it with a one-colour view. And we're all, myself included, liable to doing that. I just want to quickly point out, because it refers back to something Siam said earlier, the book David Sling there is a fantastic, it's a slightly clunky sci-fi novel, which I've quoted there, and it has two really interesting points. There's a massive real-world example of the use of the prisoner dilemma in there, which anyone who's got anything to do with rebasing DAOs, if you don't know what the prisoner dilemma is, you should not be trading them. It underpins game theory and the tokenomics of all of the rebasing DAOs that move forward. So it's a really interesting hit. And the actual, I'm going to read the, wasn't going to read the strap line for it, but it was interesting in what Siam said around how warfare would work in the future. The strap line for this book: unwilling to risk the use of nuclear power, the US and Russia tried to develop the ultimate in computer-controlled smart weapons. So literally a novel written, I think in the 50s, already talking about that in terms of how that could work in the future. So an interesting point. But we tend to think of it like this. We tend to think of it in terms of legal and illegal cliff. So anything off the edge of the cliff is illegal, shouldn't be touched. Everything here is shiny and squeaky clean. And we have this kind of whole grey area of tax avoidance, which we want to try and sit in as best we can. And it comes down to the two real main setups for where it is. Evasion, completely illegal. Jimmy Carr in the middle. And avoidance on the other side. I'll touch back on my mate Jimmy in a bit, but I can guess that most of you understand why he's up there. But again, evasion, illegal. Avoidance, perfectly legal. But it isn't that level of one colour grey. Effectively what you've got is you've got your Jimmy Carr completely moral in the middle. And so here, this is the boundary between absolute illegality and legal. And then on the left, you've effectively got tax evasion. The black here, completely illegal tax evasion. And then you do have an element of grey within there, because what you have is sham illegal schemes that masquerade the appearance of being legal. And some that flip into there after the HMRC change their mind on them. And then on the right, you've got tax avoidance, which is technically legal. And then as you get further into the darker grey of that, stuff which kind of stems the line between irresponsible morality, but actually generally welcomed. Now, I think it's just as irresponsible, never ever stray into the legal band, but I think it's just as irresponsible to leave yourself purely on the white line. Why would you leave anything there that shouldn't be? Anyone that's got a tax-free ISA or puts money in pension, you're tax avoidance. You're doing that purely to save tax on what you're looking at. So moving into this area isn't necessarily a bad thing. It should be actively encouraged, because if not, you should not pay more tax than you need to pay. So, yeah, and the hard part here is that the HMRC used to provide what they call clearing. You could go and say, I've got this idea. This is what my interpretation of these rules are. Is that okay? And they go, yeah or no, and give you proper clearance as to whether that was useful. No, they won't. They want to give themselves the wiggle room to go, it was over here, tough, over into this side. So then we come back to our mate Jimmy, and I've changed the words now from avoidance and evasion to morality and perception. Because I think I disagree with a lot of people on the point around Jimmy Carr, and obviously he was dragged through the press for tax avoidance at the time. Notice the word avoidance, completely legal way of doing it. Now, he obviously was publicly dragged through, and he actually backed down and said that he would pay more tax. And he said he did so because he felt morally obliged to do it, and that he was worried he would lose it all. Morally obliged, morality. There's a great quote which is it illegal or is it legal? Yes. Is it moral? Ask a bishop. Why should morality come into tax? It's a strange. Let's change the whole tax system. Let's let everyone just pay what you feel morally obliged to pay. Yeah. Let's see how long. NHS wouldn't last a day. Anyone here that puts their hand up and say, oh yeah, I'll pay a lot, I'll pay more than what I pay now because I feel morally obliged to do, absolute liar. I'm convinced of it. And so morality should not come into it. And he was worried about perception. Now, put this into context. Jimmy Carr was worried about perception and morality. His whole last part of his set is his career-ending jokes. He had the LGBTQ population a year back dragging him through the press. Recently, he had the Holocaust people dragging him through the press for jokes he'd made, which were offensive. And he did not back down one bit, but the HMRC, and he morally pays more tax. That shows the level of panic and discord and perception that sits around tax avoidance. Now, after that, the HMRC closed that loophole and moved it back into evasion. So he would have had to kind of back down on it anyway. But at the time, that wasn't the point. He felt panicked about the morality and the perception of the HMRC, but he'll happily slag off Holocaust. Strange setup in my book. And I'm running out of time a bit on this, so I'll whiz over this bit. This was an example I had of an employee benefit trust, which was sold to a client of mine by one of the big six, as it was, accountancy firms at the time, that said, oh, this is a completely legal way of saving tax. Not saving tax, deferring tax. It was a 10-year deferral scheme via an offshore setup where you could avoid effectively the time value of money. Excuse me. Would you rather pay £1 million now or £1 million in 10 years' time? All day long, I'll pay it in 10 years' time. Completely legal, completely within the right-hand side of the slide. HMRC said, no, too many people are using that. We flip it over to the other side. Now illegal. You've got to pay it back or we'll pull you through the courts. And that client spent thousands and thousands and thousands going to solicitors. Oh yeah, no, we can challenge this. We can work out a way that it's fine. You got the right advice. The original Big Six firm washed their hands of it. And then effectively, the solicitor would change their mind on it and slowly bring down their advice, and then he'd have to go find another client that would solicitor, which would promise him the world and effectively be a sham in the long term. So it probably ends up costing him more than the tax in the long run, and he'll still have to pay the tax. So sometimes if these things seem better, then, there's no easy wins within this. I say that the HMRC may be slow, but they are not stupid. And if it's an easy win, it's probably not going to be true.